So this tutorial is going to walk us through the process of masking. Now, masking is an extraordinarily useful, almost mandatory technique. Often what I say is layers and masking are the two things that separate a beginning Photoshop user to an intermediate Photoshop user. And you could even go further and say that masking and layers, and probably selections too, will separate an intermediate user to an advanced user. So it's really understanding how layers, selections, and masks all work together. Now, the easiest way I can explain masks, quite simply, is think of a window. When the window is clean, you can see through it. And when the window is dirty, say with like black, dirty dust, oil, paint, whatever, you can't see through it. So all a mask does is it reveals or obscures parts of a layer. And we use these to create a composite like this. Now this is a kickback to the surrealist artist Rene Magritte, where he's got kind of apples on bowler hat, something like that. And what I've done is I fused two layers together in a way that looks fairly believable. I don't think that anybody would look at this and assume that this was photographed from reality. Clearly it's been photoshopped, but I've done a pretty good job of hiding the seams as far as like blending the two images together. And masks do this better than anything else. One thing that early Photoshop users are going to want to do is use the eraser tool. And by all means, the eraser tool is fantastic. It's located right here. Yours will look a little bit different. It will look like a proper eraser. But yes, this is your eraser tool, and masks behave very similar because they do hide things. But the benefit to a mask is, unlike the eraser, you can always bring it back. So this is the final, and this is what I want you to complete. Now this is part one of a multi-tiered tutorial. The next part is I'm going to give you these assets and let you resize these up yourself. But the way that it's put together right now, all three of these layers should be sized up appropriately, more or less. The next one, I'm going to let you select the backgrounds out and kind of adjust them that way. But for right now, what we can do is go ahead and get started. First thing that I want you to do is name your layers. So we'll call this clouds because I do want you to get in the habit of naming layers. This one we'll call hat. I'm just double clicking here, and this one we'll call apple. Because the more that you get comfortable with Photoshop, the more layers you're going to have. It's going to be really important that you do name these. All right, what we need to do is we need to make sure that the apple is about the right size for the hat. Right now it's a little bit large. So we're going to use the move tool. This is our V tool. And you can see that we can kind of guess and say, well, it kind of looks right here and it kind of looks right here, but I don't want to do that. I want to be very precise about this. So what I'm going to do is on this layer, I'm going to drop the opacity down so I can see through it slightly. I'm going to about 75. I can still see the hat, but I can see enough of the apple. So I understand that, yeah, it is a little bit large right now. While this corner right here lines up pretty good, this one's way too big. So what we need to do is we need to transform this. So again, it needs to be on the layer. It's easy to be on a different layer and go to a transform function, but make sure that we're on the apple, and we're going to go to Edit, Transform, Free Transform. Edit, Free Transform. And you can see that the hotkey for this is Control T. So once this is enabled, you'll see that we get a bounding box here. So we're allowed to click, hold, and drag. Now remember, you're going to want to hold down the Shift key because if you don't, it's easy to squash and stretch it. And while this might be nice for like a funhouse mirror effect, we do want this to stay relatively proportionate. And I'm going to size it up just so the edges are pretty close to the edge of the hat. And this looks pretty good. You can see that the top of the apple is going over a little bit, and I'm fine with that. So get as close as you can. And once you're happy with it or not, you either need to accept or deny the transformation. And the easiest way to do this is either hit enter or escape. You can also hit the little check mark up here or the little, what we call the Ghostbuster symbol, the slash icon. But this looks good, so I'm going to go ahead and accept it. Bring the opacity back up. And let's go ahead and pop a mask on this layer. Now, putting a mask on a layer is really, really simple. It's just this little icon right here, this little rectangle with a circle. Kind of looks almost like a little camera icon. But when we click this, there's our window. And right now the window is white, which means we can completely see through it. But to give you an idea of what this looks like, with the mask selected, not the layer. It's easy to be on the layer, and if I was to hit Control I, that inverts the colors, not what I want. I want to make sure that I'm on the mask, and I'll hit Control I. And you can see that, one, the apple disappears. Two, what was once white is now black, meaning that window has been obscured. It's got construction paper over it. It's got spray paint over it. It's obscuring the information on this layer. But what's great about this is with that layer selected, I can get a brush out and I can paint with white, and you can see that I can bring that image back. So unlike erasing, it remembers what information was truly there. So let me go ahead and Control I. All right, so let's feather this so we get a nice composited blend between these two. So what we're going to want to make sure that you're on the mask. It's very simple to be on the layer, and then if you paint with black, you'll see something that looks like this, which is not what we want to see. We want to make sure that we're on the layer mask, and the way that you'll know that is there's a teeny little bounding box around that layer mask icon. So when in doubt, just make sure that you see that bounding box, and if you do make a mistake, you can always Control Z, or if you make a few mistakes, make sure that you revert back to your history panel and go back however many states you need to. All right, let's go ahead and let's make sure that we're on the layer mask. Now we are going to dirty up the window, so to speak. So we're going to paint with black. When you're on your mask, you only have grayscale over here. So you'll never see red or green or any colors like that. It's just going to be black or white or gray. So that's kind of refreshing, makes it easy on us. So the layer mask is selected. I've got black loaded. I have a brush, not a history brush. This we probably won't talk about this semester, but we're going to talk about this right here, the brush. And I want to make sure that I got a good brush set for this. So if you don't see your brush palette over here, you'll want to hit F5. F5 will reveal your brushes. And here's what we're going to want to load in. We're going to want to make sure that the hardness of the brush is set to 0. This is going to give us a nice soft edge to our brush. Now we're going to talk all about this brush engine in subsequent demos. So if this looks a little bit intimidating to you, don't worry about it. Just do what I do. Bring your spacing down to 0. You don't need any spacing on this. Hardness is set to 0. And yeah, so we got a nice soft edge brush. And then make sure that everything else is unchecked. There's some really cool features with your brush dynamics that we'll talk about, but right now we just need a common soft edge brush. Once you're happy with that, you can choose the size here if you want, smaller or larger, but what I like to do is with my brush enabled out here is use the bracket keys. So left bracket will make it smaller, right bracket will make it larger. And that's the same for Illustrator's brushes as well. All right, we are on the mask. So now if I paint with black, it looks like I'm erasing it. So maybe I want this erased out. And that looks pretty good, but it would be nice if it looked a little bit more gradual, like the final. So the way that we're going to achieve this is paint with a low opacity. So what I can do is I can flip to white, paint some of that back in. And now instead of painting at 100% opacity, let's try a low opacity of say like 25. And we'll paint some back in. Well, that went a little bit too far. So let me use black here, and I'm just going to paint some areas out. The way that opacity works is every pass that you take over this, it will add X amount of opacity to it. So in this case, I've got 27. Let's bring it down to 14. And I'm going to paint with white to bring some back. So every time I paint over this, every time I click, hold, and drag off of it, it puts another 13% opacity. So I can click, 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 and then if I think I've gone too far, I'll just back it off with some black, bring it back it off, until I'm really happy with the way that the two images are merged together. And that's it. Masking does not have to be that difficult. Pardon me. I think this is one of the easier ways to kind of understand what's going on here. But remember, just think of this mask as a window. When the window is clean, we can see through it. So everywhere that's white in this window, we can see the image. Anything that's black is obscuring it. This is going to be perfect for any of your composites, or if you need to remove things from the background, or if you need to remove anything from anything, this is the best way to do it. Okay, good luck, and like I said, we'll continue with this and we'll get into some more advanced masking techniques, but I think that this is a pretty good place to start. So let me know if you have questions.